sorry it takes a while for setting up. Yeah, we will begin our group presentation next class, next hour. Okay. So make sure that everyone has a group. Okay. 就是如果只要请你确定你的组别这样子。Okay. So I know that there are some people maybe have some difficulties of coordinating with your group members, but I want you to learn how to maybe deal with some different situations. Okay, so yeah, there must be some difficulties, especially coordination problems always exist, and well, it's part of your learning process. Okay, so if you do have some difficulty, you can just email me and maybe I can give you some suggestion, but it all depends on yourself, every group, so you have to deal with it. Okay， 就是各组可能会遇到一些麻烦或是问题，那请大家尽量的去解决。那如果没有办法的话，可以问我意见，但是最后还是要由各组自己去面对这样子哈。Okay, yeah, please. Anyone, yeah. So today, I mean, the first three groups will present a dictator that is well known, but I encourage you to find someone is less known by everyone, okay? But it's fine, anyone can be good. 就是找任何人都可以。那前三组报告的都是我蛮熟悉的组别的人，好，但是没有关系，就是如果你们可以找一些就是大家不熟的人也是很好的。Okay. So today we are going to talk about a personalist dictatorship. Most of the time, I mean, well, it's a matter of levels or scales. Every dictatorship has a leader that we can call it as a dictator, but some people concentrate power more than others. So it's a personalist dictatorship. So first of all, I just have this recently as last week. So Elon Musk, who is now the most famous famous person or one of the most powerful person in the world, just retweet this. So basically says that Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Hitler didn't murder millions of people. Their public sector workers did. And it seems that Elon Musk agreed with this statement. So what's wrong with this? What do you think? So the leaders, yeah, please.
I mean, supposedly saying that the leader of a country can't control whether or not their population dies. It's like the people that they surround themselves by, even though those people had absolute power during that time.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, what else? Yeah, please.
This is the most basic form of the historical revisionism.
Historical revisionism? Yeah. So what is that? Can you elaborate that?
It's when you try to rewrite history to fit your narrative.
Yeah. So these people try to maybe change the narrative that these people, these leaders, did not do something bad. It is others. It is all their public sectors, their generals, the policemen doing this. But who is in control? I mean, who is in charge of all this public sector? It is the leaders, right? Yeah. So, but there are some different. I mean, when we are going to find out who is doing what in the past, they must have some different kind of responsibility. So the leader must be more responsible for all of the tragedies. But these people who execute the order of the leaders must also pay their responsibility. Okay, so but yeah, it is unfortunate that we have a people here, a person here who is very likely to admire this kind of statement or narratives. But as a citizens in democracies, we have to learn how to differentiate this from what we are learning. Okay, 就是这个像马斯克这种人，他们是非常的崇拜独裁者哦。那他们现在就是讲说啊，这些人呢都没有做错事情，做错事情是其他人，其实其他的那个公务人员，就是这个是史达林、毛泽东、希特勒他们其实只是跟他们没有关系这样子，好，他们没有杀掉几百万的人，都是下面的人杀的这样子。但事实上他们就是领导者，So who is in charge of Taiwan's white terror and the 4 decades long martial law? It's Jiang Jing, or who want to reshape the narrative that they are doing these bad things. Okay, it's always like this in many places. Okay, 就是领导者通常都会想办法去假装自己没有做坏事，假装自己这些人都不是我杀的，只是其他人，或者是说根本就没有这回事。Okay. So this is the Taiwanese case. So yesterday is March 20th, marked the beginning of the massacre. Okay. So in 1947, the 228 incident. After the 228 incident, Chen Yi here, Chen Yi is who is in the top general in Taiwan that time. Just have a telegraph to Chiang Kai-shek in mainland China at that time to call for troops coming to Taiwan. And after 2 or 3 weeks, the troops arrived and then they started the massacre. So yesterday, the troops arrived in Taiwan in the first week of March in 1947, and then they started the massacre. And March 20th is the day that General Chen Yi just announced that they are going to sweep all of the oppositions in Taiwan. So March 20th is also another anniversary we have to memorize. Memorize is a good word here. I mean, we have to remember this. Okay, remember this. Okay, so this is Chen Yi, the top leader that time in Taiwan, and this is Peng Mengqi, the general who executed the massacre. And this is Chiang Kai-shek, that time in mainland China. So 1947. And in 1949, he was totally defeated in China and then just rebuilt a government here in Taiwan. So last week, we talked about typology of authoritarian regime. Basically, it's from Geddes, Wright, and Erica Friends. So in their data, they categorize dictatorship into 4 different types. And the most common type is personalist regime, military regime, and party-based, and then monarchy. So different regimes, they identify different leading groups. So for example, in the military, it is a military officers that has a very clear hierarchy in their leading group. And then this group has some constraint on the leader. 就是在这个分类当中，最主要的那个标准是去看说那个整个领导的群体是谁，那个群体可不可以给予领导者一定程度的限制？如果可以的话，如果不行的话就是 personal 啊，如果可以的话就是看他是 military 的还是就是政党的。So in the party-based regime, we see a political party. So that party, the leading groups are not mainly from civilians, not from the military. Okay, it is the main difference between party-based and military. So because everyone is not from the military, so there's no clear hierarchy of this leading group. So in the military, it's also very clear rank, right? So there's a clear hierarchy in these groups, but not really the case in the party-based regime. 就在军队当中有非常明显的阶层，所以在领导阶层，通常在 military group 的话会有非常清楚的那个就是阶层关系。可是如果是政党的话就不一定。So there are some gray zones. So if you look at in the data set, some countries or some regimes they will have mixed type. So for example, sometimes you will see they mark a regime with personal party base, personal slash party base, or military personal. So there is some gray zone there. It's very not very easy to identify. Well, it's a totally one type. So sometimes it's a mix. So yeah. So it depends on how you use this data. So they will tell you they will have a data set and then also have a code book to tell you why it's a mix. OK， 就是在他们的这个 data 里面呢，他们会跟你讲说，有些政权它是同时有 personal 或者 military 的这个特征，所以他会就是在另外跟你讲说，哦，就是为什么它是这样子编的。OK，but mostly we can identify different types. So for example, Taiwan's Chiang Kai-shek and Jiang Jingguo. What is the type in the data set? We see a very clear strongman, right? Chiang Kai-shek and Jiang Jingguo. However, there also exists a very strong party. So the party also sometimes constrain the leaders. The leaders cannot do anything he wants. Okay, so even Chiang Kai-shek or even Jiang Jingguo is sometimes he has to play as a role of the party leader, and also Jiang Jingguo is a head of the executive yuan. So he cannot do anything he wants. Yeah, sometimes there are oppositions. Okay, so it's not personal. So in the data set, Taiwan's Jiang Jingguo and Chiang Kai-shek are categorized as party based, because there is a party, working party, and that party is very strong. And that party, KMT, is maybe one of the most strong party in the world. Okay, so KMT is a very strong party. Okay, but some people, some dictators like South Korea's how to say it in English? 那个朴正熙 Park Chung-hee, okay, in South Korea, he does not has well, there is party, but the party is just like just nobody. I mean, nobody can constrain Park Chung-hee. Okay, so it's more likely to be personal or military, because Park Chung-hee is from the military. Okay. So the key element is the group, the leadership group, and yeah. So there's a definition. I mean, from every conference, we see some very clear definition here. So in a personalist dictatorship, it's a one-man rule. Power is exclusively in the hands of a single individual. So that person can determine everything. Nobody can constrain it. So it's a personalist dictatorship. Okay. There's no autonomous institutions. Okay. Well, again, there's no clear cut. So we see even in the party-based, in a party-based or military regime, we can see that the dictators can influence a lot of decisions. Okay. So for example, Chiang Kai-shek, he can, I mean, for the court, for the judges, Chiang Kai-shek can turn over every judge, every judicial cases. He can jump in and determine whether these people should die or not. Okay, but there's still the judicial system is there. The judicial system is working. Okay, Chiang Kai-shek is not influencing everything. Okay, so there's maybe different levels. So no autonomous institutions. Military is subordinate to the leader. Okay, political parties have no de facto power. There is political party, but there's no power. Okay, so policy choices are determined by the leader. No checks and balance, and well, a group of leaders, friends, and families members will assist in governing. So this is the definition or characteristics of the personalist dictatorship. 就这个就是个人式独裁的那个最主要的这个内容这样子哈。那这应该不用翻译了，大家应该都可以自己看。好 ，We see after the Cold War, there's a rise of the personalist regime. So because the total numbers, you can see the total numbers of dictatorship after Cold War just declined. So the percentage of the personalist regime just rise a lot. Okay, so there's a sharp decline of the monarchy here, or the party-based regime here. So you can see the percentage of this personalist regime is rising. Okay. So we have a required reading of, it's not the Putin problem, because Putin is maybe the most symbolic or the most well-known personal regime in contemporary politics. So the articles, a lot of articles just use Putin as an example. So this is the required reading. Yeah, please read that, okay? So personalist leader, you can see that in different articles, like this article, or you can compare with Erica Friend's book, that they have very similar characteristics or definitions of personal regime. So I mean, there's a domination of the political realm by a single individual and limited constraint on that leader. And well, there are some similar terms like sultanism. Am I pronounced correct? 就是这个，如果我们中文应该会翻译成苏丹式政体吧。就是一个 is a sultan. Sultan is the ancient name of the king. So it's a leader. It's an individual that concentrates over the power, ruled by fear, total control, or the tyrant. Tyrant is also similar terms of dictators who controls power. So each personalist regime will have a sign or a process of personalization. So personalization is a process that we can see some people leaders trying to concentrate the power, to destroy some of the institutions, or to maybe use the power to maybe put his family members to some important positions. 就是在这些个人式政权当中，我们都会看到一些很明显的这种个人化的那个特征。这个个人化的特征包括就是比如说他就是慢慢的打击所有的不喜欢的这个组织，然后把这个他自己的人马就是放到各个重要的位置上。So in another articles by Erica Friends, she writes that the most apparent, obvious sign of personalization is that the leader creates his own party. Okay, he abandons the existing party and then creates a new one. That party just basically serves for the dictators. Okay. 就是在个人化当中有一个非常明显的特征，就是呢，那个 leader 会自己创造一个 party 出来，他就把原有的这个 party 就是给去掉这样。Well, but this personalization also occurs in democracies. So in some democracies, we see that the leaders trying to concentrate power, trying to bypass some of the existing institutions. Well, you can see the examples of the Trump administration. Okay, he's doing a lot of things to the judges, and just fired a group of the prosecutors, and especially the prosecutors just involved in some cases against himself, and then he just fired them. Okay, and then he required the judicial system to impeach some of the judges that rule against himself. However, in democracies, the leaders cannot do whatever he wants. So there's check and balance. So we see the judicial system, the Chief Justice in the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court, just reject his requirement. Okay. 就是在民主国家当中，我们也会看到 personalization. Okay, so personalization also occur in some democracies. Some leaders trying to concentrate power, but there are some certain rules that prohibit the leaders from doing whatever he wants. 就是在民主国家当中，那个领导者不能够随心所欲的做任何他想要做的事情。OK，当然他可以在做他法律职权当中做的事情，可是他会遇到不同的那个不同的那个制衡，不同的制衡。像川普他就想要去弹劾那个之前起诉他的检察官跟 法官。那这个最高法院的那个首席大法官就拒绝了川普这样的这个要求。OK， and you can see that the Chief Justice is a conservative, so in theory he's more likely to be in the same side with the Republicans, but still he independently just realized his power to reject some of the demands by the executive. Okay, this is democracy. So there are some checks and balances. At least there are some. Okay, so also for me, one of the most difference between democracy and autocracy is that if we elect some people we don't like, we can always change it. We can always change the situation. We can always have a party turnover next time. Maybe this is one of the most important difference for me from democracy and autocracy. 就是对我来讲，民主国家跟威权国家最大的不同之一呢，就是我们永远有下一次的选举可以把我们不喜欢的人换掉。Okay, so this is maybe one of the biggest difference between democracy and autocracy, because in autocracy you don't have meaningful choices, you don't have alternative. Even if you do not like a dictator, or even if you do not like a leader, you cannot change it. Okay, so maybe the choice or alternative choice is a basic rule in democracies. Okay. Yeah. So Erica Friends in the book just lists some of the signs of personalization. So if you see this happening, then well, we can call it the personalization. And maybe if this process just keep going, then well, there must be some. I mean, the leader can concentrate power, and it's more likely that we can call it as a personalist regime. Okay. So firstly, narrowing the inner circle. Inner circle is the small group of people who can have the power to influence the decision-making process. Inner circle, okay? Narrowing, so make it smaller. 就是在这个过程当中，这些事情发生的话，我们就可以更加确定说，哦，那个领导者正在想办法，就是个人化，想办法把这个权力更加的集中。那第一项就是让那个可以做决策的这些小圈圈的人更小，小圈圈的人更小。Installation of lawyers in key positions of power. So you make your friends very close allies to the key positions of power. So it's all the decision of the leader. Promotion of family members to powerful posts. Yeah, family members. Well, we also see this in democracies, like. Well, again, against Trump administration, his daughter-in-law, and now his son, in the decision-making process. Well, do you know that in democracies we have a lot of laws to maybe prevent some of the conflict of interest? So for example, recently there are a lot of controversies that. The legislators hire the family members as their assistant. And yeah, some people just want to make laws to prevent that. Well, in different positions. So in the government, we cannot hire the family members. 尤其是直系一等亲. I don't know how to say English in 直系一等亲. I mean do anyone knows that? 直系一等亲就是the most close family members, like your wife, your spouse, your parents, your kids, into the positions surrounding you. So that's called as a conflict of interest, to prevent the conflict of interest. But in autocracy, there's no such rule. Okay. 就是在民主国家，我们很多时候会有法律去禁止你雇佣你的那个亲属，进到跟你有关的职位，这个是要避免利益的冲突。Okay, so and also there's a creation of new political party or creation of new movement, at least a mobilization of the mass to do something, for example, to strive for a constitutional revision， 就是独裁者很喜欢创造新的政党，或者是去鼓动民众去支持一些像修宪啊这些活动。So it's very frequent that the dictators use the referendums or plebiscites to make new laws or new constitutions to concentrate power. And there's a creation of new security services that is violent, the violent approaches, apparatus to concentrate power. So these are all signs of personalization that if some leaders are doing this, then we can maybe observe that the power is going to be concentrated on the single individual. 就是说这些事情发生的时候，我们就可以说啊，这个就是在个人化，就在个人化。There are some famous dictators here, like Mussolini of Italy, Hitler of Germany, Stalin, Soviet Union, Mao Zedong, Kim Il-sung. Am I correct? Pronounce that? 这个是金日成吧？是吗 ？Kim Il-sung, 金日成 the father of 金正恩。Okay. Well, I don't know how to pronounce this again. What? Ceausescu. Ceausescu of Romania. Sorry for that, but yeah. So there are a lot of dictators here. Yeah, by the historian Feng Ke. Again, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's very famous. There's a lot of books on dictatorship. Okay. So here are some of the explanation here. No dictator can rule through fear and violence alone. So naked power can be grabbed and held temporarily, but it never suffices in the long term. In the 20th century, as new technologies allow leaders to place their image and voice directly into their citizens' homes, a new phenomenon appeared where dictators exploited the cult of personality to achieve the illusion of popular approval without ever having to resort to elections. So basically, it tells you that in dictatorship, because there's no formal rules or just like in democracies that we follow the laws. So dictators cannot rule by violence alone. So many dictators, they are trying to shape the popularity by so-called exploited the cult of personality. 就是个人崇拜，就是用去塑造一种个人崇拜 ，OK， to shape that everybody loves him, and to make people support him, OK. So there are some different strategies of doing this. So you cannot always using violence to rule. You have to maybe because there's a lot of people that in your country. You have to attract foreign direct investment. You have to interact with international actors. So you cannot only resort to violence. 对独裁者来说，你不能永远只依靠那个暴力，好，因为你这个国家正常经济还要发展，对，你还要跟其他国家一起来往，然后你还要就是吸引国外投资，吸引国外的游客啊什么，所以你不能只靠暴力 ，OK。所以独裁者他们会需要采用不同的方式来做统治。So when the dictators want to consolidate their power, they cannot only resort to violence. They have to pretend that they are very normal leaders, and they are very good to people. They can attract foreign visitors or foreign direct investment. They can show that they are providing public good. Okay. And one of the strategies of consolidating power is the cult of personality. Okay. Cult of personality in Mandarin is said 个人崇拜 I'm not sure, but yeah, but 就是说你让个人就是塑造成一个神格化，或者是让大家觉得很崇拜你，个人崇拜。Well, before we go into the personal cult, there's a question here. Thank you for addressing up this question. So the question is that, to what extent is that personalization of a regime primarily a communication tool that masks a more complex governing structure? So basically, since the example here is that Putin in Russia, he also has to maybe collaborate with some oligarchies or some business tycoons, something like that. So to reinforce its personalization, but it's not basically his ruling alone. So basically, there's some people, some Putin's allies or very close friends help him to rule, but not only Putin itself. So again, I have two responses. The first one is yes, it is always a propaganda to shape or to tell a story that Putin is very strong. Putin is in charge of everything. Putin can do everything he wants. I mean, to make it a powerful leader, the image of a powerful leader. And that image has two phases. One is that to make people love you. Another one is to make people fear you. Okay, a leader will want to shape this image. Okay, so yes, it is a propaganda that Putin wants to make a narrative that he's very strong. He can do everything. Okay. And also, but sometimes the propaganda is not true. Sometimes, okay. We must see whether these tycoons or whether his allies or whether the oligarchs or bureaucratic institutions or this is a Silovik, am I correctly pronounce that? Silovik is a person from the military or the secret services. Okay, these people like the secret police. Okay, these people indeed is part of the political machine in the dictatorship. But we have to see that whether they can have checks and balance or any constraints on the leader. But according to most of the research, we can make sure that Mr. Putin is not constrained by all of this. So we can still think that Mr. Putin is a personalist. I mean, Russia is a personalist regime, not a party-based regime. Okay. So indeed, sometimes we see that the dictators must want to shape the image of a powerful leader. But still, we can check whether there are any meaningful constraints on the leader. Okay? So tools for survival. For the leader in dictatorship, there are some in the toolbox. He has some different toolbox. Repression by violence, right? Also, just as we mentioned that a dictator cannot only rely on the violence. So he must select some patronage networks and co-optation. We will have this topic in 2 weeks after the spring break. Okay, and then he also, I mean, every dictator will use the cult of personality, 就是个人崇拜. And for the strategies, there are some strategy of divide and conquer. So to face different groups in the society. The cult of personality is that to, how to say that? The society comes to believe that the leader possesses exceptional personal, intellectual, oratorical, pronounced correctly, diplomatic or other abilities. That is to shape that the leader is capable of doing a lot of things. Okay, that leader, that person can do a lot of things. Okay, that is a nurture of the cult of personality. 就是通常我们会把这个领导者，把他塑造成一个无所不能的一个状况，好，然后你就会觉得他很厉害，好，这就是一个个人崇拜。So like John Kasich, I mean, well, next hour we will have the discussion of John Kasich. So supporters perceive the leader as a superhuman, blindly believe them, follow them unconditionally. So this is the purpose of the cult of personality. So basically, it makes you believe that the leaders can do everything. Okay. Well, this leads to an intense and unquestioning loyalty to the leader on behalf of the public. Okay. So this is some of the example here. Chiang Kai-shek's statue everywhere. So this is the only one. I mean, the only one statue with horse in Zhengda, National Zhengzhi University. Okay. The outcomes of personalization. Well, Erica French has another book specifically for this topic, and also you can see the article. It's not just a Putin problem by French and is it? Oh, and another author. Okay, so basically the outcome of personalization is very bad. Even within all of the dictatorship, personalization may be the worst outcome. 就是即使是在独裁者的不同的类型里面，个人化的独裁者永远都是那种最差的，就是那个带来的效果会最差。Okay, so research finds that the personal regime compared to party-based and military regime are more likely to be corrupted, and there are more clientelism. That is, clientelism is that the leaders rely on giving you some of the bribes or giving you some of the material interest in exchange for your support. That is called clientelism, 侍从主义. Okay, so in personalist regime, there are more interstate wars, more foreign policy mistakes. Okay, because there's no constraints on the leader. Okay, there's no constraint on the leader. Less foreign aid, abuse of foreign aid, less international agreements, because other countries do not want to interact with this personalized regime. Less likely to democratize, vulnerable to economic crisis and unstable policies. That is the worst outcome of the dictatorship. Okay, I mean compared to other types of authoritarian regime. 跟军事政权还有那个政党的政权比起来，政党式的独裁比起来，个人式独裁的效果是最差的。OK， 因为你没有任何的没有任何人可以给予这个领导者任何的建议或者是踩刹车，就当领导者要犯错的时候不能踩刹车。So, for example, why the strongman or the personalist regime are more aggressive on the foreign policies, are more likely to use force against others, because well, the individual who is in control, they are more likely. I mean, the nature. The inherent characteristic of the leader is more ambitious, because he controls the power by brutal ways. So he is also very brutal to maybe others. Okay, and the leader in personalist regime tend to perceive lower cost of fighting, because he fights for his power, and also there's nobody else can tell him the cost of fighting. Okay. Also, there's no institutions that can punish the leader if the leaders fail to deliver some of the policies. So, for example, use of force or the maybe economic policy failure or any kind of failure, there's no institutions can punish them, punish the leader. Okay. Also, others, the subordinates, do not want to change under individual under the strongman. Okay, so there's no constraint. So therefore, the leader tends to use more aggressive ways to deal with the problem. 就为什么个人式的独裁会比较容易使用武力，然后会比较有侵略性呢？是因为没有人可以限制他，然后也没有人可以处罚他，所以他就不会觉得说就算我做错事也不会怎么样，我就先打打看嘛。先打了再说，军事武力先用出去再说，反正也不会怎么样。OK， 好，所以而且他因为就是透过很残酷的方式去取得政权，所以他本身就会是比较认为处理方式就要比较残酷，就比较就是反正就是他觉得所有的事情都是要打斗来的，好，所以就是他也会用这种方式去对待其他国家。OK。Okay, so we have a very similar question from last week, that should we stop memorizing the dictators, especially those, those with personal cult or the personalized dictators? So my answer is that each society has its own context and different standard. For example, there's a discussion of the Germans. They do not want to memorize Hitler anymore. They think that Hitler is a negative example for their democracy. So each society will have its own standard, and the societies reach this standard by discussion. Okay, it's in different ways. Okay, so the purpose is to strengthen democracy. If we think that memorizing a dictator will hurt our democracy, then we tend to prohibit that. Okay. And the procedure, the most important part is the procedure. How can we reach, or how can we execute a decision like removing Chiang Kai-shek's statue, for example? In democracies, we follow the rule of law. That is, the decision to remove Chiang Kai-shek must be passed by our legislature, and this legislature is elected by people, and there are free discussion. There's a lot of discussion, and the civil society can also involve in the discussion. And finally, we reach our decision to maybe remove some of Chiang Kai-shek's statue. But so far, we are not prohibiting that. We're still allowing the discussion, or we're still allowing the memorizing Chiang Kai-shek. Okay, and also these decisions, these laws can also be checked by the judicial review. Okay. 就是说，当我们要去讨论说要不要去纪念独裁者的时候，必须要在民主国家有不同的标准。那这个标准呢，是由人们讨论出来的。就像在德国，大家决定不要纪念希特勒，但在台湾，其实大家还是有在纪念蒋介石吧，还是可以。可如果就算我们今天要全面的移除蒋介石，也必须要是有法律来做规定，而这个法律呢是人们一起讨论，然后人们可以去选择立法委员嘛，对不对？然后呢，在立法委员真的通过一个法律要去除蒋介石全面的话，那也是必须要符合比例原则，必须要是可以被司法来做检视的，必须要通过大法官的检验。Okay, so if we want to stop memorizing the dictators, yeah, we should follow the rule. We should follow the law. So you can see that I upload another articles by Khrushchev. Well, is that the name correctly? 就是赫鲁雪夫。Khrushchev is one of the leader of Soviet Union. You can see how he criticized Stalin, and even the Soviet Union itself stopped memorizing Stalin because Stalin just killed too many people. Okay, so you can see I just uploaded that article. You can see how Khrushchev just criticized their former leader. Okay, so the standard is always it's not fixed. Okay, it's not fixed. We can determine whether a dictator should be memorized or not. OK， 就是在我上传一篇文章是赫鲁雪夫去批评史达林，那就算在苏联，他们也不会去无条件的纪念前独裁者史达林，这样，就是因为史达林做了很多坏事情，所以这个标准是永远都是浮动的。到底我们要不要纪念一个独裁者，是由整个社会一起做决定的。OK， 好 ，OK，so we take a rest. So next, 10 minutes later, we start the presentation. OK。
我有看到那个川课，在川课上面有那个作业上面写说有什么 extra points， 就是什么叫2份有额外的分数，是2本书还是2份报告？
你要看那个 syllabus 啊，
对对
syllabus 上有写。
我不知道他的，就是他说选择的时候加，是说上传1份，然后额外加不知道几趴还是什么。
对对对 ，syllabus 上有写，有不同的，好像是有一本书跟那个讲座好像都可以。对对，你看一下 syllabus， 我看一下。可以，你把它退出就可以了。
premier jeunesse. Mais on passe en dernier de toute façon. Mais on passe le dernier. on passe mi-mai.
Extra 的话呢，就是有包括。Additional 的话就是比如说你看这里有一个 additional， 就是那个讲座的记录，你就是多交一个讲座记录就可以多加学习分数的2分，那你最多可以加到8个，就是你最多可以交4个，就是讲座的记录。
原本的2个到4个。
对对对。
2个之外额外。
2个之外的额外啊，因为2个是 require 嘛，你原本就要交2个。对，那你如果再多交1份。
那这个讲座是要自己找吗？
要自己找啊，就是任何的讲座，然后座谈会。那个研讨会都可以，对啊，这个就是讲
对。心得是1984，然后可以再写另外2个。对
对对，这个就是你可以再多写1份，然后是加6分，就是学习分数的6分，对，所以这个6%，所以如果你再写一个，因为这学习分这个是要写2页嘛，这要求你，那因为这个读书心得是比较难啊，就是比较因为你要先看完一本书，你看完一本书之后写那个它的。书摘跟评论，
这是一本2本书，总共2本书。
没有总共只要交1本啊，那你总共可以多交1本，就是多加6分了。对，6分其实蛮多的，对不对？就是所以是这个。
然后还有那个就是一开始你给我们的 readings folder 被删掉，还有办法可以找到吗？
没有删掉啊。
我点进去，它是说就是找不到此页。
找不到实页面，好，那我再更新一下那个。好，我再更新一次给你们好了。我等一下再更新一次，因为好像有重新。好 ，OK。
还有那个就是，我其实原本不太懂 question box 是问今天上的内容，还是下一个礼拜准备要上的内容？
其实都可以啦，其实都可以。就是说，他其实是要让大家练习问问题，就是说问一个你觉得不太好回答的问题，或者是只要跟独裁真有相关就可以。对，大概是这样子。
然后我看到说你有上课录影，上课录影有办法在公开的平台找到吗？
有啊，在 syllabus 上有啊，你看 syllabus 的第1页就有，对，就是 syllabus 的那个syllabus 这档案的这个第1页就有。
但是我在 YouTube 频道上好像没有看到，还是
有啊，你就打这个，对，Yeah. Anyone? Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about if you have like any recommendation of seminar conferences in English.
Oh yes.
Because like I struggled to find one.
Yes. So if I find one, I will email you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just for the subject for the presentation, is it possible to work on Mao's Zedong, or has anyone else already taken the subject?
Please email to TA because is on syllabus. It's on syllabus. So syllabus here.
So this one?
Yeah. Well, let me just write you the folder again, so you can see every files there. Yeah.
My question was about seminars, and I managed to find one with a vice president, Hai Xiao, and professor, and a Columbia professor. So I don't know if it's okay with you, like if I do my seminar.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah.
Perfect. So it's
Yeah, it's
tomorrow.
perfect. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Good. I like Vice President Xiao.
Oh, really?
She's very good. I mean, she's a former ambassador to the U.S.
Wow.
Taiwan's ambassador, and you can see there's a lot of media praising him. I mean, the American media praising him
Wow.
as one of the most influential ambassadors in Washington D.C.
Wow. Because I think this conversation is going to be about like the China-Taiwan relation, like in very uncertain
Sure.
times, like.
Sure. Can you send me that? I can just forward to other students. Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I think it was something like for Columbia alumni, so I don't know if we will accept.
Oh, okay. So let's
So
forget
I
it.
don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
是你的麦嘎链接坏掉了。
好，我知道，刚才有人跟我讲，我等下弄一下
你还。没有说这个 group word answer， 还有
哦，对耶。
还有 final 的这个，
好
你上礼拜说你要本书再交一份。
对，那你可以从上面那些书选，就是这个前面那份书选，啊，或者是都可以，只要跟独裁真有关就可以。对，
嘻嘻。
对。
因为我玩过你这个。没有，我昨天练球，昨天还练球。
Yeah.
I would like to ask for the seminar notes.
Yeah.
I saw this, and like it's a book. What's this like a reading book and like talking about the themes and everything. And I was thinking about connecting this topic with like I'm from Hungary, and
Okay.
like this week the like the party band Pride.
Okay.
So and also like Hungary's position is kind of
Okay.
authoritarian.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I want to connect the things that's happening at home with this like Pride theme.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Children book.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is good for the.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's okay.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
No, I think it's okay.
You mean a number is wrong?
只有
数字是错的。
错的有吗？没有。你这不对。我已经加了一个对。
哦，OK，好嘞。
加油，我就是说3码，现在
哦不，哎，
那个是就是沉浸式。那你行政卡？我觉得好像就被出不来了吧？你这样太辛苦。还好，没差。行政卡，而且我好像还有我看要笔记本。好像还行。A B 成中，追，然后就讲很多接。可是这样你回不来了。啊，叫他把你推到公车。
把这个换到。
然后朋友就想换客服，而且因为你快要累。哎，其中什么？其中是得讲。
More official。
所以晚上怎么去？晚上录音。
不用。
因为你玩，那种泥，然后再玩。你这样后面对不对？
对。
那你这样后面，这样不行，这样你就挡后。
我要去哪里？
我们在这里了。那我这种排队。好，那我们谁负责那个弄简报？谁爱？还是我？
有简报。这有简报。
哦，有简报。
Okay, so this is our first group. Please give them a big hand. Okay, so you have the floor is yours.
Hello,
everyone, we are Group 1 for presenting. Today we are going to talking about a dictator who called Lee Kuan Yew. And first of all, I'll introduce the motivation part of our group. As a country geographically close to ours, Singapore shares many similarities with us, yet its political system and governance approach differ significantly. Despite its small land area, Singapore is renowned for its strategic economic location, which provides it with a great advantage. Its governance policies and choice of official languages have further established its foundation on the international stage. However, during Singapore's journey to independence, behind its success, how did its first Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, make decisions and employ various tools and strategies to simultaneously elevate Singapore onto the global stage while steering it toward a more authoritarian regime? Our group believes that as an authoritarian country, Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew utilized the concept of Asian values as one of the primary tools to justify its authoritarian rule. Therefore, we aim to explore this topic and analyze how this theory operates and persuades the public to submit the iron-fisted rule of a dictator. And next, I'll introduce the background of Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew was the first Prime Minister of Singapore and one of the founding members of the country's only ruling party since independence, called PAP. He served as Prime Minister for 31 years starting in 1959, then continued to hold power as Senior Minister and Minister Mentor until his retirement in 2011. Lee Kuan Yew's governance philosophy has been highly controversial. Some praise his administration for being clean and corruption-free, while others argue that the people lack media and speech freedom. Lee Kuan Yew proposed the concept of Asian values to justify his authoritarian rule, and this report will focus on exploring this aspect.
For the next part, I'll explain what is Asian value in simple way. First, definition. Lee Kuan Yew believed that China, Japan, and other East Asian countries share a common foundation of Confucianism, which has shaped the social-cultural landscape of these regions. This shared regional culture has led East Asian countries to develop a tendency toward collectivism rather than individualism and self-expression. The individual is seen as an inseparable part of the family, and the family in turn is an integral part in society. Social order is maintained through the family, while the government merely serves to protect these functions from external disruption. In short, the fundamental unit of society in this family rather than the individual. Next, truth or bias. Lee Kuan Yew claimed that the individualism of Western democracy and human rights were not applicable to East Asia, as its cultural values were fundamentally different from those of the West. As a result, the notion of Asian value was used by him to justify the idea that human rights protection must be considered within the context of specific cultural, social, economic, and political conditions. Under this framework, when human rights come into conflict with cultural, communal, or religious values, human rights must take a backseat. Since Asia was different from the West in many aspects, he arranged that human rights and democracy are exclusive to the West and not suitable for Asia. Last but not least, these are 5 concepts of Asian values, such as these 5. After my part, will focus on discussing these points.
So this part will introduce the hierarchical collect in authoritarian in Asian value. So since authoritarian regimes seek to maintain their legacy by justifying their rule and isolating it from external influence. A typical example of this is Lee Kuan Yew's theory of Asian value, which promotes hierarchical collect. He argued that in what he called Confucian cultural nation, people naturally exhibit loyalty to their group leader. In this theory, hierarchical relationships are rooted in the Confucian patriarchal family structure,
which is then expanded to the societal level, forming a national-scale patriarchy system. With this framework, the national leader is regarded as the father figure of the entire nation, and citizens are expected to follow Confucian ethics by showing obedience and respect to their leader. Moreover, individual interests must be subordinated to collective national interests, prioritizing their country's development and stability above all else. This strong hierarchical collection structure enables a authoritarian regime to maintain absolute control over the nation, ensuring political stability and continuity.
And next, I want to talk about what is reciprocity in relationship. It means emphasizing harmony and cooperation among members of society rather than individual opposition and conflict. That is to say, avoiding conflict with others, and Iguaya's emphasis on reciprocity in relationship can be summarized in 3 main points. First is harmony and cooperation are paramount. He advocated for society centered on family and social communities, where individual actions should consider the interests of others. Avoiding conflict is not passive concession but about emphasizing collective interests and coexisting harmony. And second is decision-making model. Within the framework of Asian values, the decision-making process prioritizing consensus building, allows open consultation and resolve disputes through internal coordination. And third is the contract between government and the people. The government provides economic and social security, while the people reciprocate with obedience. In other words, as long as citizens enjoy economic growth, low inflation, high employment, and political stability, they are willing to accept the government's authoritarianism.
And next, I'd like to talk about community interests and how they were reflected in Begonya's governance. Community interests prioritize collective well-being over individual benefits, focusing on economic growth, social stability, and public safety. It aims to balance personal rights with societal needs. Under Lee Kuan-yew, Singapore's governance placed national stability and economic success above personal freedoms. He promoted Asian values such as collectivism, elite leadership, and social harmony. Strict laws and media control were enforced to maintain order. This approach led to remarkable economic prosperity, low crime rates, and a high standard of living. However, it also came with restricted political freedom and suppression of dissents, which sparked controversy. In the end, the question remains, how do we strike a balance between stability and individual freedom? This is something every society must carefully consider.
Okay, hello everyone. Next part we'll introduce the contribution of families, and what to talk about this we have to know what is the contribution. Familism is the basic content is the interest of the family or fundamental and individual interests are less emphasized. So that we could find is the origin from the Confucian culture, and we could also find many pieces of evidence in Chinese literature to support this point. For example, the famous Chinese philosopher Mrs. once said, people have a constant say and generally summarized as the foundation of the world lies in the nation, and the foundation of the nation lies in the family. This point is translated by AI. Okay. However, this demonstrates that in traditional Confucian society, the family was regarded as the fundamental and important unit of all aspects of life. For this reason, Lee Kuan-yew believed that the smallest unit of the nation should be the family, not the individual. Thus, it also advocates for the individual is a dispensable part of the family, and the family is part of the society's social order origin from the family. So that he said, in Asian culture, there's a lack of emphasizing individualism, is conflict, and there's a differences between the culture of the human rights and the values. However, although his thinking is there's different, however, we think it's argue that it's merely excuse justified dedicated behavior is justifiable and suitable in Singapore. So they will present 3 reasons why Lee Kuan-yew's argument is unreasonable. The first is does Confucian culture deny individualism? We think it's not because although Confucian society values for the family, however, the concept of individual is still exists, it's impossible to ignore the individual in the all country of that. The second part is prioritizing family interest does not mean disregarding the human rights. We think it's totally two different subjects and without any relevance. The third part is Asia countries have not developed solely based on the Confucian culture. For example, Taiwan is a culture where it's influenced by the Confucian culture. However, we didn't always follow the culture at all. So that based on the three parts, we think therefore what the Confucian feminism may provide a reasonable explanation. In reality, it's a way that dedicated about the human right and by the reason of the culture.
And last month, Personalist Dictatorship in Angela News reversed the system in the country led by Alex Guillermo. The core principle of this governance model is uncertainty for own good. It's the core under paternalistic meritocracy. The government function as a patriarch within this system, setting standards for national affairs and overseeing both public matters and private aspects of individual lives. Under this system, dissenting voices were not allowed, and freedoms such as freedom of speech and freedom of press were restricted. The fundamental belief was that the interests of the community were more important than individual interests, and the economic growth was more important than human rights. Impact of this system is that when economic growth and social development well, people tend to give authority to those things more natural. And it also leads to legal legitimacy and helps maintain the peer advantage.
So, time to wrap up. In conclusion, Lee Kuan Yew stands out as a non-aligned leader who successfully leveraged Asian values to establish an original Singaporean governance model post-World War II. Based on 5 pillars known as hierarchical collectivism, patriarchy, reciprocity in relationships, community interests, and Confucian fatalism, his approach emitted remarkable results, including the impressive development of Singapore from a backward newly independent country to a thriving globalized economy. Yet, when he was in office, his political doctrine was characterized by significant authoritarian trends, backed by the bureaucratic elite and the support of the PAP to distort the political and the institutional game, resulting in an acute societal control. However, after 31 years of premiership, Lee Kuan Yew remains an influential political figure whose role keeps being associated with the development of Singapore. This ambiguous stance on the acceptance of authoritarianism, in spite of a concrete manifestation on the ground, arguably questions the success of the propaganda in shaping intergenerational collective consciousness. Thank you.
So we hope everyone can join the Q&A part. So we have designed the games to encourage everyone to engagement. So please open Kahoot and enter the code. And the champion can get the prize, which is the donut.
Right?
I dare you. Soda.
It's on the way.
Yeah, I don't know. You gotta start on something.
Are everyone going to join us? Okay, and we'll start the game. 我小朋友声音。哎，没关系啊。还有声音吗？因为可以打成一个。我觉得题目太长了，大家已经缩短了，它比上次。要念题目。
Which of the following best represent the core values of reciprocity in relationships?
I know. Everyone was really confident.
In the decision-making model of reciprocity in relationship, primary approach to resolving disputes. Seeking solutions through public debate and confrontation, relying on individual action to drive change, achieve consensus through internal coordinate and avoid open conflict, resolving all disputes through legal litigation.
我觉得你们在制造欢乐而已嘛。
挺快乐的，
蛮爽的。
我觉得蛮不错，效果。对，可能有点难吧。我觉得好像也还好。题目太长，就其实认真仔细想一下，答出。
主要是看不到。
字太小。但是我觉得答对的都是，答对的人更多啊。
According to the perspective of Confucian family, which of the following statement is most accurate? Individual interest should take precedence over family interest. The family is the foundation of society and the individual is part of it. Confucian culture completely denies the importance of the individual. The development of East Asia is entirely determined by Confucian culture. Cause the greatest impact and controversy in society, implement strict control on speech and media regulation, increasing funding for public education, strengthening the social welfare system, promoting technological innovation and economic development. According to the colonial governments, which of the following best reflect the priority given to community interest? Maximization of individual freedom and rights for implementation of the democratic system, emphasis on individual innovation and competition, prioritization of national stability and economic success.
说很快，就是要超快。哎，16个。哦，这一题。
Which of the following policy-based examples are personalist dictatorship? Implementing universal suffrage for all citizens, have experienced political elites create policy and requiring compliance, encourage open criticism of government decisions,
rotating government officials to prevent power concentration.
No, wait, what's with the double star? What's going on?
Which impacts the personalistic matrix multi-corporacy has been on Singapore political system. Citizens gain greater political participation and decision-making power. Opposition parties gain fair competition opportunities. People in trust have power to exist to ensure economic and social development. The media operates usually without government interference. Okay, thank you for everyone participating, and the champion can get the donuts from us after the class.
Professor, we also prevent debating questions, so.
But I think time is
Okay.
So like donuts, bro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I think these questions are very good for the exam. Okay, this is very good for exam. So you can just use this for your final exam questions. So let me explain that there are some words there. Paternalistic meritocracy. OK， 这家父长式的攻击主义 meritocracy. Meritocracy is a hierarchical structure that is based on your rank and based on your 考试 exam scores, based on your how effective is your work. So everyone is putting in this very solid hierarchical structure. Okay, it's very common in many dictators, and it's also very common in democracies, because we want to make sure that everyone is working for the machine. So meritocracy, not really a bad thing, but well, in Singapore, it uses this as one of the tools to make sure that the government is working effectively. Okay, so Li Guangyao is a very interesting so-called. We don't usually call him as a dictator, simply because that I mean, the outcomes of the governance of Singapore seems to be very good. So Singapore is now still one of the most important hub of international economy, and yeah, so people seem to neglect that Singapore is still not a democracy. OK， 就是新加坡是一个当然以我们现在的标准来看，它并不是一个民主国家，但是人们并不会很常说李光耀是一个独裁者，因为他的经济表现实在太好。但是实际上，如果我们从我们的这个分析框架来看，它仍然是一个独裁国家。那只是说它确实在经济上表现的是很好的。So next week we will find a part of our discussion we will discuss how to compare the economic or governance outcomes of democracy and autocracy. So Singapore is one of the outliers in authoritarian regimes that it has a very
effective economic development model. But not many countries or not many dictatorships can mimic this kind of performance. Okay, so Singapore is one of the richest, non-democracies in the world. Okay, so yeah, so because of the time limit, so I will give the floor to the next.
就下一组。
Yeah, let's go. All right, let's do it. Oh, okay. Wait, let's go forward. Okay. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our presentation. Today we're going to be presenting about the authoritarian rule of the nationalist government, focusing on the White Terror and Chiang Kai-shek. Good?
Okay.
Oops, sorry. All right, here's a quick overview, a little bit what we'll be talking about today. Oops, that's all. Okay. So, quick for an introduction, as stated by Professor Finn. So, the biggest difference between democracy and a dictatorship lies in who determines power and who decides the leader's tenure. In democratic countries, since leaders are elected through universal suffrage, they theoretically need to consider the interests of all citizens. However, in dictatorships, rulers maintain power by relying on a small group of ruling elites. As a result, their primary goal is to ensure the stability of the regime, prioritizing the interests of these elites. So, we're going to be focusing a lot on Chiang Kai-shek's authoritarian rule, and for the context of his rule, it really took place in Taiwan after World War II ended. For context, in 1943, there was he met with a bunch of Western leaders in Cairo to talk about his having control of Taiwan. And in 1945, when the war ended, Kuomintang had the power of Taiwan. And at the same time, though, the civil war in China was still continuing. And while Chiang Kai-shek was in China, fighting Mao, there was an oppressive and corrupt government going on in Taiwan. And this is really defined by the 228 incident and the White Terror, which we'll get into a bit today. In 1949, though, the Chinese Civil War ended and the Kuomintang retreated back to Taiwan, and this is where the full kind of emphasis on martial law took place in Taiwan, which we've heard about in this class a little bit already. So the 228 incident, which again we talked about a little bit, but a little bit more details about this. So the first incident occurred on the 27th, when the Jianmais was selling cigarettes, and the Tobacco Monopoly Bureau guards that were in the town that night determined that the type of cigarettes that she was selling were not legal. They shouldn't have been sold. And they got into a quarrel, and one of them hit her with his gun. And this kind of, the surrounding people who watched this happen formed an angry mob to kind of, because they were upset at what was happening. And as this mob became more intense, the guards fled and fired their weapon once and killed a civilian that was there. And news about this spread across Taiwan, and riots erupted. And so on the 28th, there was a protest, and more people were killed in suppression of this protest by the Kuomintang. And this kind of suppression that killed thousands of people laid the groundwork for the White Terror, which was this long period that followed these events. So, kind of sparked by the 228 incident, this was a list of people arrested in connection to it. This was an extremely long period of martial law that was enacted, again, when Chiang Kai-shek and the rest of Kuomintang came back to Taiwan post-World War II. This is a time when there was no systems in place to check the government's power. This is what authoritarian rule looks like. and using laws put in place such as statutes with the detection and eradication of spies during the period of communist rebellion and statutes for punishment of rebellion. Laws like this were used as justification for why people could be put in prison. And this was a mass suppression across the island. And it was just paranoia and fear because there was an unfair judicial system. That people were unfairly prosecuted. And a core of this was conversion and eradication of indigenous or local life. There's a military prison that you can still see kind of parts of located at Karina Island is still there. And in places like this and across the island, people were forced to speak Mandarin. Thousands were imprisoned and executed. And of course, there's no freedom of speech. There was no protest. Again, this was an unfair authoritarian rule with no checks on the power. And things like speaking about 228, absolutely no way that was allowed. It was heavily suppressed by the government in an attempt to continue their ruling. And it was an unknown death toll because things were not well documented. There were systematic executions and arrests, but also kind of more random killings as well. So there's an estimated upwards of 30,000 people were killed in this period. Yeah, and this is a monument. All right.
Okay, next I will introduce different classification of cases about white terror. During martial law, the motivation for the suppression of communist rebellion system intensified the white terror, leading to numerous cases. Different scholars have different approaches to classifying the cases and types of convictions. First is communist-related cases. These cases are related to the Chinese Civil War, the Cold War, and similar events. They are primarily associated with the two groups. According to some research, leftist force nearly collapsed around the early 1950s, yet the authorities showed no signs of leniency towards spies. For example, the Huangwangong incidents in the 1950s, disillusioned by the nationalist government's actions and the massacres under the guise of pacification during the 228 incident. He chose to join the Communist Party organization. Then the Communist Party organization were gradually dismantled by the government. However, Chiang Kai-shek believed the communist agents deserved only one punishment, death. His family also suffered long-term punishment afterwards. Scholars have referred to this as a complex human rights violation, referring to the dual suffering under the white terror. Next. Okay, second is Taiwan independence-related cases. In the 1960s, the number of Taiwan independence-related cases began to rise. The reason is that in addition to the Chinese Communist Party's undercover agents in Taiwan being caught by the government, there are fewer and fewer people in Taiwan who are dissatisfied with forming the government and want to unify with China. Most people began to support the idea of Taiwan's independence. One example is the Taiyuan incident in the 1970s. At that time, Taiyuan prison held many political prisoners involved in the Taiwan independence movement. They want to use the strength of the international community to help Taiwan democratize. So they planned to occupy a radio station and broadcast a Taiwan independence declaration. In the end, only one person successfully escaped, while the others were executed by firing squad for rebellion.
Okay, and here comes classification C, freedom of speech cases. And before we get into it, I want to ask a small question. Does anyone know the Pokya, the Sailor Man, this comic? Does everyone know? In Chinese, we call 大力水手不快. So, everyone knows? Okay, let's get into it. Case 1 in 1967, the Bo Yang translated the comic Pope Ye, the Sailor Man for China Daily News. The scenes where the protagonist and his son run for president was seen as government critical. Bo was arrested for attacking a national leadership center. In Case 2 in 1949, Yang Kui drafted a peace declaration calling for the release of Tutu, a political prisoner, and freedom of speech. He also was charged with communist propaganda. During the martial law period, Chiang Kai-shek was the actual final decision maker in most military trials. The final judgment of the cases had little to do with factual evidence and was largely based on the subjective judgments of those in power. Additionally, there were instances where intelligence officers seeking rewards and recognition arrested innocent civilians, leading to a multitude and wrongful conviction during the White Terror period. And here's our conclusion. Due to its suppression failed, its truth prevailed. And why we're going to say that? Because in the past, the Tutu and the White Terror period is damaged the Taiwan international image because the government don't want anyone to discuss this or search for any kind of detail of this. So instead, a vital reminder facing history ensures human rights, freedom, and justice for the reckoning future. If we fail to recognize collective trauma, there would be no foundation for later construction of human rights. This is why, after walking through the history, we must pursue transitional justice. This is not a revenge by the new government against the old, rather it is reckoning with the wounds of history, a covenant of those who still bear the scars and is silent burning for the innocent lives lost. Remember these days so that we may recognize that everything we take for granted in our lives today was hard-won and that it can be taken away by any moment. One day we may collectively forget when those who control the narrative of our society began went in the language of celebration. And here comes our question for you guys. As discussed, and question number 1, if obeying authority inherently evil, should those who helped Chiang Kai-shek also be held responsible? And Hannah Arendt coined the term the vanity of evil to describe Adolf Eichmann, one of Holocaust organizers. She believes evil exists in both the extreme evil of totalitarian rulers and the penalty of evil of systemic participants. So here's a question for you guys. So does anyone want to talk about this? You can raise your hand. Don't be shy. Yeah.
You give them a second.
Yeah.
My hand's shaking. Yo.
That's fine.
You're good.
Saying that obeying authority is inherently evil is a bit too polarized. It's always not always all white or all white is always in the middle. Should those who have Chiang Kai-shek also be held responsible? So, in my opinion, it's very hard for just the bottom of the ladder of the chain of command to be held responsible, but the decision makers and the planners and all this should have some sort of responsibility and should be held accountable for their actions.
Thanks. That was nice. That was perfect.
Anybody else?
Yeah, to follow up on that point, I think it really reminds me of like Yuri after like my first history, like history of Fascism, and this is one British historian, Christopher Brown, I think, that theorized the idea of the ordinary man, especially during the Holocaust. So as a frame, the system majorly was evil, and so people inside the system were forced to act good and to behave the way they did. But I think, to come back on the question, should those who like Chiang Kai-shek also be held responsible? Absolutely, because though the system is very important to understand how everything was shaped at that time, we cannot always be responsible like people for their actions. And facing history in the eyes also requires to held responsible people for their actions.
Thanks. Both of you are very perfect. Your answers are very nice.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question to that? How do you feel on kind of what Bazzi was talking a little bit about like different levels of command, different levels of power. Do you also agree that like depending on what level of power you are in, that changes your punishment?
Oh, there has to be levels of powers to be considered. First, because everything's like either too black or too white.
Right.
And this is also the reason we're here, like to examine the history and also like
Yeah.
these types of questions. But yeah, but responsibility should be considered.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, please. I do have another question.
Yeah.
Just go to it because we don't have time.
Okay. Question to remove all signs of Chiang Kai-shek's dictatorship, like the sign in our library. Our library is named called Kai-shek Library. So should we change the name? What do you think?
Yeah, please.
I'm not really, well, I think we already talked about, we touched on that like last month, but I'm not really sure if removing all the signs of Chiang Kai-shek dictatorship would necessarily have us history, because again, these well, statues or the memorial are evidence, are testimonies of the past, and in order to be faced with our history, we have to examine the past, and we also have to come up with explanation, with education, in order for the generation, the younger generation who have not known personally Chiang Kai-shek, to be able to know about their history, about their past. And I think you touched on also Nazi Germany and transitional justice, and like that German people wouldn't actually celebrate their leaders for sure, but we still have to organize, well, remembrance ceremonies. We still have to educate people, the young generation, and also activists and also Holocaust survivors. There are well, institutions that that are able to that enable people to give their testimony and also for that legacy to continue throughout generations. So it is important to continue that and to face history with the eyes, the back, and the good end of history.
Thanks. Okay.
Oh, okay, we've been cut off.
Yeah, please. I would say that, of course, we shouldn't remove the signs of Chiang Kai-shek dictatorship, but more of a bring awareness to what it really was. Because someone that doesn't know the history can go in the street and see street names and libraries, and then you see the Chiang Kai-shek memorial and all this. And younger generation might think that it was a great time to be living on it. So, of course, you won't tear down the Chiang Kai-shek memorial. That's too much work. But just renaming street names or libraries and things like this, and bringing awareness to what truly happened under Chiang Kai-shek's rule, I think really is beneficial to society.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your presentations today. I think the time control is very good. Also, the questions are very good for everyone. Here I just upload, I just fixed the folders. How to say that? The website of the folders today. So here is the final thing today for today's little quiz.
So here's the folder. So I will store in every files we need, including the books and the articles. So here's XA capital, lowercase k, 1, 7, and capital N. Okay, url.cc. Yeah. I think today's presentations are very good. You guys set a very good example for the following group. So please keep up your good work. I will see you next week. Yeah. So next week we are going to talk about the selectorate theory. So please read the Dictator's Handbook. Okay, it's all on the file, on the folder.